Hello and welcome back to another episode of An Interview with an OM. I'm your host, Alicia Bunce, and today we're talking with Sara Gibson from the Charlotte Symphony.
So will you remind me where you're in school?
I go to Wichita State.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here and sitting down with me.
Happy to.
To start, do you want to give me a bio?
Sure. I'm the operations manager for the Charlotte Symphony in North Carolina. There's another Charlotte Symphony somewhere else. And I have been with the orchestra for 8 years. The first 4 years I was actually in the development department, and I was the database manager and donor relations manager. And then about 4 years ago, I moved over to the operations department. My background is I studied music in undergrad. I'm a flute player. So I was a performance and education major, and then I went on and got my master's in flute at the University of North Texas. And then after that, I went to University of Georgia and studied nonprofit organizations. So I have a master's degree in nonprofit management, basically. And yeah, that's about it. I kind of did that myself because I was being educated at a time where there wasn't really a performing arts administration type of setup everywhere. There were a couple of degree programs, and now lots of places have them. So that was sort of my self-guided trajectory to here.
Oh, perfect. I'm actually also a flute player and got my undergrad in music ed. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Was that at Wichita State also, or are you?
No, I went to Morehead State in Kentucky.
Okay.
It's a super tiny school.
Yeah.
So with the Charlotte Symphony, what was before COVID? What was your day-to-day schedule like?
So we do, I'm on a team of 5, and we have the general manager is my boss, and then we have a person at the same level as me as our artistic planning manager. Then we have a music librarian and a personnel manager. So most of the time I'm in the office. When we're not at rehearsals, I'll be in the office doing administrative things. Like today I'm working on a security list to provide to one of our venues so that we can, they can check us off as we go in and know who's coming in and that kind of thing. Before COVID, I mean, that is still one of my standard, like one little tiny piece of my job. I communicate all production information to whatever venue we're going into. We don't have our own venue. We just kind of hop around. We have 2 main venues in downtown Charlotte that during normal times we perform in. And then we also go to we have a lot of community partnerships and different things at various places where everything is different all the time. So I have to kind of get them ready to know what we're bringing in, which is like a bunch of union rules and a bunch of equipment and a bunch of, we need temperature to be set in a certain way. So basically I communicate all of that kind of thing to whoever needs to know it, whether it's venues or musicians. I often will, I communicate our calendar and I manage our calendar in an administrative, in our database basically. And so I'm responsible for anything in the collective bargaining agreement that has to do with communicating changes or keeping in accordance with our deadlines in the CBA. What else do? I hire vendors for if we need sound vendors or video vendors, anything like that. With our stage manager, I make sure all of our equipment is up to date. Like we have 2 trucks, so I make sure when I'm doing it well, I make sure that the trucks are registered and in a good way, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, you answered so many of my later questions with that. Right now, staying with the day-to-day, how has that changed? I was going to say post-COVID, but we're still COVID. So how's that changed?
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, we've been lucky. I don't want to hesitate to say it too strongly, but we have. When it fell sort of, we missed the last several months of our season, so of last season. And then a lot of the real quarantine before Charlotte opened back up happened during kind of our it's not really called a furlough period, but it's like during the weeks that we don't perform. So we perform for 34 weeks a season. Actually, it might have even been 37 in accordance with our CBA. And So I sort of like some of it fell within that time that we wouldn't have been playing anyway. So now that this 2021 season has begun, I'm a part of a committee for like return to work safety procedures. So that's what I've been working on with our orchestra personnel manager and our VP of human resources. And that's basically taking all of the information that is out there, studies about what the right things to do are, and kind of compiling those. The personnel manager really has done most of the big stuff, but anything that had to do with staging or safety for vendors or the crew or anything like that, and anything related to the venue, I've had to communicate and plan for. So now that we're kind of going back, we're doing a lot of things that are strings only. Our protocol right now is that strings only, the only people we're doing indoors at rehearsals or performances at all are strings because of aerosol concerns. So we have done a number of outdoor events since our season began almost a month ago now, I guess 3 weeks ago, that involve winds, small groups like quintets and woodwind trios and things like that. So that's right now in terms of like my day-to-day stuff, it's kind of the same, but more because it's all, it's extra. And, normally the details that have changed are things like, okay, we normally have our stage manager bring a truck with all the stands and the chairs and all this stuff, but do we need a 24-foot truck to bring 4 music stands and 4 chairs to so it's a lot of navigating that with the rest of my colleagues to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be in a way that we don't normally have to do that. You know what I mean?
Oh, so you said you were part of a team. Is there anyone that answers to you or is below you?
No, I don't supervise anyone in this role right now, but I do have seasonal staff that I hire for a summer series. That's one of my major projects every year is our summer series outdoors at Symphony Park, which is basically a public park that's open, that's attached to a mall, which sounds odd, but I can send you a link to it. It was a venue that was built for us, and that's why it's called Symphony Park, because we've been doing this community concert out there since, probably for 20 years. So I hire a small crew to help me with those logistics every summer, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, I do not supervise, but I work really closely with our stage manager. The rest of the team, we all report to the general manager.
Okay. You also touched a bit on the CBA. How involved are you in writing contracts and just like managing the CBA?
I'm not involved in the negotiation of it at all. That usually, and actually we've had a lot of turnover here in the last 3 years. So the last folks who were involved in it were the former CEO and the former artistic planning manager, or she was actually a director of artistic planning, and she's moved on to something else. So now the people who would normally, at least for the Charlotte Symphony, be involved in negotiating it would be our general manager and probably the orchestra personnel manager. And my involvement with it is making sure that certain elements are executed properly. So like I mentioned, the temperature control, like when we're indoors or outdoors, there are ranges that we must be within to perform. And I make sure that the venues all know that, hey, if it's not between 65 and 80, I'm going to be knocking on your door, that kind of thing. So mostly I execute elements of that. The other thing I do is manage all the musicians' instrument insurance. Part of the CBA is that they can have, instruments that they use for Charlotte Symphony performances and purposes insured. So I manage things like that. So I basically execute elements of something that the other folks negotiate.
Oh, okay. Can you tell me about your proudest moment with the Charlotte Symphony?
So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, I guess. I have a couple of things. So there were times, like I said, there was kind of a high rate of turnover in my department right after I started this job. So I really didn't know my job very well yet. And then my boss left, and then this other person who'd been here for a long time left. So navigating that with the remaining members of the team and getting through a really difficult season was like a long-term thing that I felt really good about. And the musicians were just incredibly patient and nice throughout that whole process. But one moment that kind of stands out, I guess, was during that time, I was at the end of my very first Summer Pop series, like finale, I guess, like the last performance. And when we do that, there's like a fireworks show at the end of it, every single year, because it's like a 4th of July sort of celebration. And it's very specific, but I kind of did the countdown for that. And it was a way of, which is really, it's part of my job. It wasn't like a treat or anything. It was actually really scary because it's like, what if I say one and nothing happens? But then it did, and it was sort of the end of the whole season, this really difficult time where everything was bananas. And I don't know, it just felt like we had gotten through it, and this, you don't really get to celebrate those moments with fireworks most of the time. So that was like a moment that kind of stood out, I think. And anytime I get to do something backstage where they're like following scores and helping with slideshows, things like that give me like a little bit of, happy, warm fuzzies.
That's great. On a little less happy note, can you also tell me about your biggest failure and what you learned from that?
I would say they're like on the small scale.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in development, actually, not really on the ops team, but I made one like stupid, like clerical error that just like caused me, and I knew it would, but it was just a pain for the whole rest of the season. It was just like every time I had to communicate with these donors, it was like, okay, like 7 extra steps because I didn't do this one thing at the very beginning. So it wasn't like the most catastrophic thing, but it was definitely the least fun thing that has happened as a result of making a mistake here. I'd say, gosh, I mean, I've definitely made some errors in communication early on. And I'm just trying to think of like, it was so crazy for the first little bit when all that stuff was happening and turnover was going on that, oh, here's a good one. I just thought, here's a good one. When I was still pretty new, we had a guest artist come in, and at the time I was responsible for booking travel and accommodations for all of our guests and all of our people. And, you send them itineraries, and you can do it all in advance. If you know who's coming and you know the dates, I mean, contracts are done, the year prior. So we've known forever. So the gentleman arrives and goes to his hotel. The car service drops him off at 11 p.m. and his reservation has been canceled, and I had no idea. So he called, and it was my fault. Like I'd given so it was something akin to like he was supposed to arrive on. I told the hotel he was going to arrive on Thursday, and really it was Friday. So when he didn't show up Thursday, they canceled his whole reservation, but no one informed me, which another hotel we work with had actually informed me that I'd made that mistake already. So I was kind of surprised to get the phone call. So I came downtown and picked up the gentleman and booked him another hotel room on the way and got him there. And then for the rest of the week, it was like, he was lovely. He couldn't have been nicer about the whole thing. But the whole rest of the week, it was like I had to go drive him back and forth, which again, we do that. That is part of what we do sometimes, but it was kind of an unexpected hiccup. But that's not a phone call you ever want to get, where you like, you just put the wrong day of the week in there. And then it's like, if the mistake had happened all these months earlier, and then this poor man has traveled all day and is just like standing in the lobby of a hotel that doesn't know who he is. So that was not amazing. But I was lucky that he was so kind about it.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked out that way.
Yeah. Yes. Some people are less pleasant for, when a problem didn't even happen, and generally not so much here, but in life.
Yeah. You spoke a little bit about doing clerical things. What's your go-to software?
So the Charlotte Symphony uses Arts Vision. Arts Vision we got it really, maybe like a year before I started in this role, and my predecessor had been played a really important role in setting it up and getting it ready, and she did such a great job that I was able to walk into a system that it was almost in a way good that it was kind of new, but I'm the administrator for it now. So whenever anyone comes on board in any department, they get a login, they can access the calendar, which is just like the first thing you see when you open it up. But we can manage everything in there. We manage all of our programs. There's like a library module. There's contract module where our artistic planning manager can build the artist contracts and just sort of spit them out and go. Is there anything in particular you want to know about it, or like what all it can do, or who does things in it?
Yeah, just what like features you like most about it, like in case it doesn't exist in the future, what should we look for?
I mean, because I manage the calendar, I'm really thankful for the facility within it, like with building projects and programs, and you can just, everything is kind of packaged nicely in a way where you can see, okay, well, here's one event. It's assigned to this whole project. This whole project I can assign like interviews, or like if communications wants to schedule an interview for a guest artist or a musician even, or the conductor, they can put it in the calendar, and there's an iCal feed that you can share with the musicians. You can make a filter for it, so the musicians can only see the orchestra services that'll populate right to their phone, whether it's Google Outlook or iPhone calendar. Or we can use it. That's the function that also allows our artistic planning manager to pull an itinerary for an artist. So she can just hit a button instead of doing a whole bunch of like, okay, I'm in Word and I'm, I mean, it's just really the features that are a part of the calendar are really great. And being able to set it up to however you like it, because, the communications department doesn't really necessarily care about what time our stage manager is loading in, but they might, so they could, it's a nice way of giving more information than anybody might need. Does that make sense? Though I will tell you what I don't love about it.
Okay.
For all of the things that you can put into it, as a database manager in the past, it's like if there's data in there, you should be able to take it out, right? And kind of do whatever you want with it. So that if I wanted to say, I just asked them, I sent a help desk ticket for something the other day, the musician instrument insurance. Like there's a way for me to go ahead and put all the instruments that are insured in a musician's profile. There's no way for me to pull it out. So it's kind of not that helpful to me when I'm trying to get them to re-up for, and make sure that every year they're current. So there for every, and I think that, are you familiar with OPAS?
No, yet, no.
So OPAS is another really popular like artistic management software, and it in particular has a really like robust library module that kind of comes preset with all these things that many orchestras already have. So Arts Vision doesn't have that, but then OPAS doesn't have a lot of the calendar facility that we have. So usually, and I think this goes with most software and databases, there's usually something you give up to get another thing.
Yeah.
That was a lot. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm excited about databases.
How do you see the industry going forward?
In relation to COVID, or just?
Yeah.
I think I'm an optimist. So for me, it's an opportunity to do a lot of things that we couldn't normally do in the interest of keeping on. I mean, so in our contract, for example, an orchestra service only counts if there are 14 or more players. Well, we can't really do that in a lot of places right now. So our general manager we're very lucky to have a general manager who has a really great relationship with the musicians. And so you have to have buy-in from everybody, right? So we've been lucky that the musicians are allowing us to make these weird services that we would normally never, ever make, and do things that are completely not allowed by the contract, right? I mean, under normal times. But they've agreed, and they're, and not every organization is as lucky as we are in that way. So a lot of places, I can only say it from our perspective because they're all so different, But I think that if people are flexible and respectful and work together, then you can, I mean, from an operational perspective, you can still get a lot done. Now, if you were to talk to our marketing VP, you know, it's not, you know, we're not raking in the money right now because we can't have patrons anywhere. So we're doing everything that we can. The musicians have been really gracious in letting us record some things, which is pretty much like without the additional pay that's stipulated in the contract. So that's been really invaluable for us. So as far as we are going, you know, we're better positioned, I think, than we could be. Overall, I think that orchestras in our position, you know, are probably feeling, you know, if the musicians and administration have a good relationship, I think that you can get a lot more accomplished. But also in the process of this, and I'm not sure how much you kind of followed it, but there are a lot of orchestras who've been forced to furlough, right? They're forced to furlough their musicians or their staff or do rolling furloughs or cancel the whole season or whatever. And sometimes it's because there's not flexibility between the groups. Sometimes it's because they own their own hall and just keeping it going is too expensive. You know, sometimes, I mean, for us, we have a fairly small staff because we don't have our own hall. So there's so many variables that I don't think anything's impossible, but I think everybody has to think creatively.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, I think flexibility is going to be huge moving forward. Switching to employment, what advice would you give to someone going into this field or your position?
My position in particular, like details really matter. Like you can't really over communicate. I think, I don't know. I mean, I just think being open to learning all kinds of things and being willing to jump in and help is always a really great way to learn on the job. I mean, my position in almost any other orchestra would be completely, you know, the duties might be completely different, or, you know, you know, at a larger orchestra, you might have 3 people that report to you, or, you know, so just, yeah, kind of knowing what other orchestras are doing, and maybe even before you start applying, I mean, like researching job descriptions to see how different they might be. The League of American Orchestras has a really great, like a page where they kind of explain various roles in the orchestra operations team and what they are usually responsible for doing, or how, you know, we used to, before we had a general manager, we had a director of operations, and that role was kind of different. So, I mean, just doing a lot of research and preparation in advance, doing things like this, and maybe setting up times to talk to people in different orchestras at different parts of the country to see how our answers are different, which is kind of what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wish you would have known more about before you went into this?
In this particular position, I wish I knew a little bit more about the technical details of a show, like what exactly, you know, I learned so much just from our stage manager. It's crazy, but you know I don't need to know how to run a lighting board, but I need to know enough about lighting an orchestra or a theater to be able to communicate to them what they need to know. So those are kinds of things that I had to learn on the job that I've never felt, even now. I mean, I've been doing this for all these years and I'm fine and nobody's complained, but I'm always a little bit like, am I telling them everything they need to know? Like, what am I not telling them that I'm going to get there and it's going to be like a surprise? So, I mean, there's not really, that's just almost more my personality, because I like to communicate everything in advance and know the details. So that's been maybe one of the harder things that I've had to learn on the job. So if you're interested in operations, a good way to learn that stuff is to get involved with your stage crew at your university, you know, shadow some people, that kind of thing. But I just kind of wandered into this position, so.
Okay, and the last thing I have is, what's the process of employment for the Charlotte Symphony?
I'm going to tell you quickly what mine was, and then I'm going to tell you what we do now. So I started with an internship. I started here as an intern in the development department to finish out my master's degree from UGA in nonprofit management. And then I got hired because everybody left the development department and they hired me into that data position. And so I've just sort of been moved around, which has worked out really well for me and hopefully for them. I hope they feel that way. But normally someone who gets hired here will post the job on like the League of American Orchestras site or our local Arts and Science Council site, various, depending on if it's like an arts specific job, those are the places, and we want somebody with orchestra experience, that's where we'll post those kinds of things. And then each manager of, you know, like our general manager for our department, the VP of marketing for that department, those folks would sort of cull the resumes and see what looks interesting to them. Our manager or the general manager here is really good about involving the team in the process, showing us the resumes and involving us in, you know, phone or Zoom interviews, Skype interviews, to help, you know, to make sure that they're a good fit on the team and that kind of thing. And then once someone gets hired, HR does all the normal like background check kind of stuff. And then we sort of, I'm trying to think if we used to have sort of a mentor buddy kind of program, and we haven't had anybody new in so long. I'm not sure if that still exists. But usually somebody will kind of be the person who introduces everybody around the office, and which can be overwhelming. Oh, that's what we do. We have one-on-ones now. That's what we do. So the CEO's assistant will sort of schedule like a 20-minute window for every employee every existing employee with the new employee, so they can kind of figure out maybe how their jobs will overlap or just have a face to put with a name. And then you just get to it.
Perfect. So yeah, that's all my questions. Do you have any more advice or tips, or do you want to plug your organization? I'm very much a question answerer, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have if anything else comes up. You know, I guess my advice is always be flexible and be ready to learn stuff and be curious. You know, like I don't understand marketing, but it's really helpful to know some things about it that are impacted by what I do, and which it seems like things wouldn't be, but always kind of get to know your team and you know, kind of learn about the different roles in different places, and how they overlap and don't. And you know, I love the Charlotte Symphony. I think everybody should buy tickets to our virtual events, and right now we're doing some live streams from a brewery that we've had a partnership with for a few years now, and those are really fun. And last week we did our first virtual recording that'll be released later to subscribers and ticket buyers. So, you know, I'll send you a link when there is one out there to send. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sitting down again and talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
I plan.
What is your interest? Yeah, what are you going to do? What is your...
Well, I graduate with my master's in arts admin in December, so that's great. And then I really want to do operations management, preferably in like an orchestra or a symphony. So I'm just trying to learn as much as I can because, like I said, I came from an education background, so I'm not 100% with all of this, but yeah. And
you'll never feel that way. Like it's no matter what you plan for, you're going to go somewhere and it's going to be like completely different, but in a good way. Like, you know, the foundations are always the same. It's about understanding what's going on and communicating it. If you ever have any questions, feel free to email me and ask about job stuff or anything. I'm happy to help.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Okay.
Let me know if I can do anything else for you, and good luck.
I will. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching and or listening. And if you're interested, there are more episodes and interviews on the same platform that you found this one, including a summary episode at the main end of the series, going over differences we may have found and overall best practices for operations managers in the nonprofit field. So stay tuned. Thank you. Goodbye.